morning, Shannon. At your end, I know it's quite early, and thank you very much for giving us this opportunity and chance to have you with us. Again, it has been a while. We're trying to do that, but finally we managed. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to be here, Adel.
Before starting, I wish to introduce Mr. Shannon Stowell to the audience. Mr. Stowell has been the CEO for Adventure Travel Trade Association since 2004, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
He is a speaker at various conferences and events. Among them is TED in travel trade fairs like ITB Berlin, WTM London. He's a board member of several tourism organizations, and I think you are an author as well for a book that was published by Nat Geo.
That's right. It's been a long time, but many years ago, we did. A friend and I co-authored a book on adventure travel for National Geographic.
Mm-hmm. And you're in restaurant business as well.
What's that?
And restaurants?
Yes. My family for 38 years. My father and my brother. I worked at the restaurant, but my father and brother and mother ran the restaurant for almost 40 years.
Okay, that's great. So in the hospitality business in general, let's put it this way.
I think hospitality and restaurant really, that's what put me through college and put me on my path. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I'm sure. Shannon, once again, thank you very much for being with us, sir. And we would like to a little bit get more information about what is ATTA all about. What is the Adventure Travel Trade Association? Please.
Yeah, so the Adventure Travel Trade Association is a global organization of companies, governments, NGOs, people, with the common thread connecting everybody being an interest in adventure tourism. And we've been in our current state since 2004, and our members are in close to 100 countries around the world. And we partner with local associations all around the world to promote sustainable and meaningful adventure travel.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so your members are organizations, they are governments, they are travel agents, tour operators. Anybody can become a member at your...
That's right. That's right. Anyone can become a member that has interest in adventure travel. The majority of our members are tour operators.
Mm-hmm.
That's the largest part of our membership, and then I would say destinations, travel agents, gear and clothing companies that are associated with adventure, and then all the other services like technology and distribution and insurance and pretty much everything inside the tourism economy that's focused on adventure. There's some representation in our membership.
Okay, and even for instance, if we say, as you know, there are certain associations within the adventure product, let's put it this way. For instance, bikers, hikers, etc. Even those can become members at your association as well.
Absolutely. It's a really thriving community of practitioners and experts from around the world that share best practices, that do business with each other, that create new concepts, innovation, and just the friendship and business relationship support that we all need, especially in challenging times like today.
Oh yes, definitely. But again, I mean, Shannon, as we agreed, I mean, this talk is informal. So let's put it this way.
Sure.
What is adventure tourism all about? I mean, can I do adventure tourism? It's quite hard for me. I mean, it's climbing and rafting and all of this. It's a hardcore thing, isn't it?
Well, it's actually not. It's a lot more accessible than a lot of people might realize. Mm-hmm. So the way that we describe adventure tourism, it really rests on three pillars. Mm-hmm. One is cultural activity, the other is nature, and then the third is some sort of physical activity. But it does not have to be hardcore. So let's say walking in Scotland, for either you or myself, would be an adventure trip by this definition because it's active. It's a culture that neither of us are a part of. And there's also that experience in nature when you're out hiking on a trail back through the high country of Scotland. So
Mm-hmm.
so it really, it allows accessibility for everybody who is interested. We like to say adventure is for everybody, and some people will choose different types of adventures. But you know, Adele, there's also there's these motivations that travelers have to go on trips. Things like they want to have unique experiences. They want to have some sort of transformational moment. They want something novel and unusual. These are all motivations that sit underneath that platform of adventure tourism, that people really just want to dive a little deeper, understand a culture a little more. Some of my favorite adventures from my entire career remain in Jordan.
Wow.
And you know, some of them were a little more extreme. We did rappel down a wadi and down a waterfall, which I'll admit was actually a little scary for me because I'm not a climber.
Mm-hmm.
And then many of the adventures really were much more culturally focused. You know, biking through the desert and sitting in a tent with a Bedouin and sharing a cup of tea. I mean, I'll never forget that. That was a transformational, novel, unusual moment, and it was an adventure experience.
So adventure is not really just putting effort in doing something. It's as well exploring things. Yeah, I mean, so you can consider adventure as a gateway or a door opener to get integrated more in culture, in health, tourism, etc.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think sometimes, not always, but sometimes what tourism tends to put people in bubbles and keep them inside a bubble, that they don't really get to meet the local people and
Yeah.
have the local cuisine. And that's kind of that would be the opposite of the type of tourism that we focus on. We really want people to understand the destination better,
Hmm.
to be respectful of the local traditions and cultures, and really really come in and learn more about the beauty of the people and the landscapes and the wildlife, the traditions, the art, the food, the music.
That's beautiful because I started to imagine that, I mean, you can do within one trip to a destination various experiences. For instance, one day you can do a walk in downtown, for instance. The other day you can do it in some rural area. The third day you can do a little bit of maybe cycling, etc. And all of this goes under adventure tourism and experiences.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is actually also a trend we see, that we've seen for a number of years now, is this, what you were just describing is kind of the customization of tours for someone's specific interest. So it might be hiking and birds. It
Hmm.
might be cycling and wildlife. It might
Hmm.
be culinary, music, and climbing. You know, so
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody has their own specific interests.
Yeah.
And you know, 50 years ago, you got on a bus and you did whatever, wherever the bus went, and you did what
Yes.
everybody else did. And
True.
you got off the bus, you got back on the bus, and now you can still do that. And there are people who still appreciate that type of travel. But now you also have the opportunity, through all the specialization of tour operators, that you can really customize a trip to fit your interests, which I think is beautiful.
I think talking about customization, especially now during these days and in the coming near future, customization will be on a larger demand. Let's put it this way, and more of an interest.
I think so.
Especially exactly, especially that with post-COVID now, despite the fact that vaccines are rolling out, but still, I think that masks will remain there. Social distancing, to a certain extent, will remain in force,
Right.
just for precaution measures in general. So, if I understood it properly, adventure tourism could be for anybody from 15 years old up to 70, 80 years old. So that depends
Absolutely.
on what kind of activity they're considering.
Absolutely. If you have an adventurous spirit at age 90, you're still absolutely welcome to be an adventurer. We encourage it. I actually love it. I love it when people who are reaching the elderly years continue to
Yeah.
show up in Jordan and Africa and Southeast Asia. And you know, admittedly, the trips is going to change a little bit. You know, it's going to need some different requirements, but that spirit of exploration, of learning, of meeting new people in another culture. Hopefully that never dies in us.
I hope so. Speaking about the change, this was my next question. How do you see it going, Shannon?
In the near future?
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost every prediction I've made since the beginning of the pandemic is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start with that, because
Okay.
things change so quickly. Things have changed and morphed, but I think, I think we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel in different places around the world as vaccines do start to get rolled out. That's going to increase traveler confidence. I think I was just reflecting on my own experience of the early days of the pandemic versus now, and now we sort of understand the routine of sanitizing and masks and distancing and just thinking differently. And so I think we're headed the right direction finally. Yet there's still our, sad, unpredictable flare-ups, like India right now is obviously going through an incredibly difficult time. And I read a number of epidemiologists who said they didn't see this coming. They didn't see this next wave. So, hopefully, inshallah, that really things start moving the right direction, that vaccines get rolled out, that people become more confident. I think 2021 will still be spotty, and we'll start to see the channels between destinations that are getting vaccinated. So I know US to UK, there's probably going to be some traffic this summer, admittedly still spotty compared to 2019. I think by 2022, we're going to see stability, barring any sort of, complete new sets of strains of COVID or anything like that. But I'm feeling good about 2022. I think 2021 is still going to be a year of endurance for all of us, because we're all interconnected. Even if the US is vaccinated, that doesn't help in a destination that is not. So that cross-border travel is still not going to happen. So I think that we're, 2021 will be bouncy, and then I believe 2022 we're really going to start seeing the light of day again.
Well, I do hope so. Yes, I totally agree that I think we were quite hopeful that 21 would be a better year now. But again, it's yes, there's some traffic, there's some movement, but again, it's quite confusing to tell you.
Right. Absolutely.
I did travel during the pandemic. I've been twice. I traveled twice.
Okay.
This year, and to tell you frankly, it's worrisome in one way or another. I mean, you're a little bit concerned. You take the precaution measures, but because you're trying to hide from something unseen, it's quite challenging. And and the thing is that the different protocols, the different procedures at different destinations is quite confusing for travelers as well. So I think that the role of governments and maybe certain associations have to put hands in hands in order to make it as much as possible unified, so that it's easier for the traveler to cope with those demands.
That's right.
Now, for instance, the EU are considering to open up, or they are starting opening it up actually since a couple of days ago. And but the problem is that certain destinations are approving certain vaccines and other destinations are not approving those vaccines. So it's, again, is it politics or is it medicine or is it what exactly? So again, this is confusing. Certain airlines are abiding the same policy. So if I have, as an example, without naming XYZ vaccine, I'm not allowed to board. But if I have the other vaccine, I'm allowed to board. So this is again confusing. So
absolutely.
Do you have a word or a say as associations, along with your other colleagues' associations, in such challenges for the travelers?
I think,
or recommendations at least, or you can reach out for.
Well, I was just thinking about that, the whole concept of risk, and we are always at risk, whether we are traveling or whether we're at home. And there is no such thing as a risk-free trip, no matter what conditions. Take COVID out of it for a second. There's no risk. there's no trip you can take that has no risk. So the goal and the responsibility of the practitioners in travel is to mitigate as much of those risks as possible. Obviously, the risk level has gone up during COVID. One of the things that we did as an association is we worked with one of the top 3 hospitals in the United States, the Cleveland Clinic, and we put together. They were incredible to work with. We came up with protocols, safety protocols for COVID, and we created an overarching protocol for adventure travel, and then we did 10 activity-specific deep dives. So rafting, hiking trips, wildlife watching trips. We created protocols on how to mitigate risk as much as possible. And those are free to everybody. There's no charge. Those can be found on by Googling Adventure Travel Trade Association and Cleveland Clinic COVID guidelines. You can find them. And that was one of our goals, is to create that baseline. So hopefully a lot of companies would be doing the same thing, so customers aren't getting spotty experiences in different places, that everybody follows these protocols and guidelines. Obviously the world's a big place and a lot of people don't even know about those guidelines. And then WTTC and others have also put out guidelines and protocols. So I think that's one thing we can do. I saw yesterday that the UN, WTO, and I think, 15 or so Latin American destinations all had an agreement to work together to open borders, more quickly. I think that was the aim of it. I didn't read it in depth. I do think that organizations like UNWTO and WTTC play a really important role right now on the global stage to really help with governments and try to coordinate as much as possible so that we don't have this super confusing set of rules. So, my brother's a perfect example of that right now. He's on day 5 of a 14-day quarantine in a hotel in Thailand, he and his wife. And, that to me doesn't totally make sense anymore with rapid testing.
Exactly.
And he actually even had COVID already. So he's got the natural immunity now. But these rules are going to repel people from traveling.
100%.
They're with they're good intentions. I understand. But I think that's why I think 2021 is going to be a rough year, is because I think that we haven't figured that out yet as a globe.
No, I totally agree. And as you've mentioned now, your brother is stuck in Thailand. Again, if I will be traveling somewhere and I would be quarantined for 14 days, I wouldn't be traveling there. I'm definitely sure. I had an experience in Armenia actually lately. It was very smooth. I really congratulate those people on working it that way. Yes, you're required to have the PCR test 72 hours before arrival. It's understood.
Sure.
Now, the good thing about 2 days ago, I learned that they approved now the certificates of vaccines. So if you are vaccinated, you are welcome to enter to the destination. So they make it really smooth and easy. And this is something you really appreciate from destinations, when they look into the concerns of the travelers and to make it more feasible and accessible to them. The same thing Cyprus is doing. I think Jordan started implementing this as well, that if you are vaccinated, you can prove that with a certificate, you're welcome. So yes, I totally agree, because it is really challenging. I mean, despite, forget the natural stress that you have thinking about the pandemic and the virus, and then you have all of these regulations. It would be a nightmare. It's not a vacation anymore.
Right. And then there's other layers of this whole story that I don't think have been solved yet. I know that there are people working on digital certificates for vaccination, but I could show you my vaccination card, which is sitting in my wallet, and you look at it and you think anybody could reproduce this and fake it.
True.
And so we're going to need some, and I understand, I'm not blaming anybody, because it's a very complex, wide-ranging issue to solve. But these are the sorts of things that the first time that somebody goes into another country with a fake vaccination card and brings COVID, that's going to be headline news, and that's going to set us back again. So I'm just hopeful that we sort of go through those speed bumps in 2021 and get it over with.
Definitely, and that's why we just, I mean, as we mentioned before, there should be a kind of a unified procedure or unified track that everybody goes through, so that it would be much feasible for travelers. Shannon, I know that you do your meetings every now and then, or every second year. How is this pandemic affecting your activities, and when is your next meetings?
Yeah, it's very difficult on us because that was our number one way of getting the trade together, was in person at events. And we did the 3 years of Adventure Next in Jordan, 2017, 18, and 19. And those were, that was an incredible set of experiences. And it was really fun to watch the community coming together and growing and adding new people every year and getting to know Jordan better. So it's a vital part of of what we do. We just had to announce last week that our summit this year will unfortunately have to go virtual again in September. The host was going to be Hokkaido, Japan. And we are now going to do this virtually just because Japan is not ready for that influx yet. You know, they have the challenge of the Olympics right now.
Yeah.
And so we can see how the difficulty is right in that situation. So our next in-person meeting, inshallah, is in Sedona, Arizona in November. And I believe it's going to happen. At this point, there are enough people that are vaccinated in the US, and we have the ability to take measures to make sure that risk is mitigated. The Cleveland Clinic is again going to advise us on our in-person event. And so that will be our first conference. We did take a group of buyers and media to Colombia in April of this year. And we had about 20 something people who went on that trip. We managed it very tightly. The Colombians were fantastic to work with. They were very careful about all the protocols. So they had an incredible experience. They got to see Colombia, got to start thinking about it, and no one got COVID. So it was a total success. So I think tightly managing trips right now in a destination that is also compliant and really wants to mitigate the risk. I think it's doable. On a larger scale, like our summit, which is 800 people, that's more of a challenge. So this year we're going to go virtual, and then the goal is to start doing physical events next year. We have about 3 that are being negotiated right now because everybody is just dying to get back together.
Oh yes, definitely. So we're talking that 2022 might be, or you see that things might start to roll back. Let's say spring 22. This is the frame that you're thinking
I think
of?
so. That's our sense as the vaccinations really start to hit around the globe at a much higher rate. Of course, different parts of the travel industry are going to recover at different rates.
Yeah.
I attended a webinar that the WTTC put on about a month ago, and the IFC World Bank was presenting, and they put up a chart to show how important certain types of travel were to people in the recovery. And adventure travel was the number one. It was the first one to start recovering. And I think there's a couple of obvious reasons for that. And then I think there's some not so obvious reasons. And then of course, at the opposite end of the spectrum was cruise. Cruise has a very, very long, a very deep hole to dig out of.
Oh yes.
But some of those reasons, Adele, like I said, some are obvious. So adventure travelers are just more adventurous, right? They're ready to go a little bit earlier. It's also the type of travel lends itself to post-COVID. So small groups, remote places, open air, generally traveling with a group of people you know.
Yeah.
And so these sorts of things lend themselves naturally to the adventure travel recovering quicker. And then I think there's a below the surface reason. And I think this will actually be helpful for Jordan too, because I think that the vertical niches, let's say adventure is one, religious tourism is one, food tourism, yoga, health, wellness. So the reason I think that those sectors will recover more quickly is that they are passion driven. So people describe themselves this way. They say, I am a climber, a biker, a cyclist. You know, I travel to experience culture. I travel for religious reasons. So it's intrinsic inside the person, whereas the average leisure traveler may be looking at the landscape and saying, you know what, it's still a little hectic out there. Let's just remodel our bathroom, or let's get you a new car this year, instead of that trip to Hawaii. And so I think that the adventure traveler, the religious traveler, those niches, it's who they are. And so they will get back out there faster, because they can't imagine not doing that. And they're just waiting for the doors to open. That's all they're waiting for. And I'm making a generalization here. There are obviously adventurers with underlying conditions that may make the decision to wait a little longer. But in general, that I believe this is why these will spring back more quickly. And I think that bodes well for Jordan, because Jordan has so much to offer in the way of these highly interest-driven verticals in tourism.
I totally agree. I totally agree that such niches will definitely be among the first to come, and for sure adventure tourism as well. Shannon, I once again I thank you very, very much for your time and for being with us today. And you really gave us some really valuable information about what to expect for the near future and how things will develop accordingly. I hope that we will have the chance to meet soon again.
I would love that.
Whether in the US, whether in Jordan, whether elsewhere. So it would always be my pleasure. And I promise you to be a little bit more active and to experience adventure tourism starting off today. Maybe I'll go out for a walk now.
I would love to. I would love to do an adventure with you, Adel.
With pleasure, sir. At any time, just let me know. Hopefully that we can catch up soon. I thank you, Mr. Shannon Stowell, the CEO and of Adventure Travel Trade Association. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us today.
My sincere pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.